Hear me? Had some technical issues with the last stream I just did, so apologies for that. But just wanted to go over the headlines over this past week. We had a lot. Jimmy Kimmel returned back to ABC. There was the Charlie Kirk memorial service on Sunday that, speaking like looking at Erica Kirk talk about forgiving her, her husband's murderer was interesting, and then looking at the flip end of that, somebody like great value Lex Luthor, Stephen Miller, talking about how much he wants to really get a war and storm started because of this. And then just talking about how Antifa was designated as a terrorist organization, even though we don't really know what really Antifa is. And so it's just been an interesting week. Wanted to start off by saying I saw the Jimmy Kimmel monologue last night, and he came back stronger than ever. Like looking at last night at it just like when it was just 1 hour in, we already had 1.7 million views on that YouTube video of his monologue, but now it's up to like 14 million views after 15 hours. So it was definitely a ratings increase for him just because of this past week. And if people don't know why this whole thing started, this started because the Federal Communications Commission, which is the government wing of censorship, the chair of the FCC took umbrage with some of the comments that Jimmy Kimmel made, which I felt were relatively tame as it pertained to the Charlie Kirk assassination, and told Disney basically that you could do this the easy way, you could do this the hard way, because the local affiliates that control the broadcasting, which broadcasts Jimmy Kimmel Live, his show, were in line to get approval from the FCC, a merger. They were trying to get a merger going, a $6 billion deal merger. This caused an uproar, and Jimmy Kimmel Live, the audience members, people who have Hulu and Disney Plus, just started canceling their subscriptions, right? And Disney lost 4 billion in revenue in 1 week. And so that showed you the real public backlash as it pertained to this entire situation, right? Um, and so he came back with his monologue. His monologue was super strong. And so that really shows, there were interesting defenders of Jimmy Kimmel as well. He's always had a feud with Senator Ted Cruz. And they had like a way back when they had an episode where Jimmy Kimmel and Ted Cruz did a basketball charity one on one, and Jimmy Kimmel lost, but it was like a big time thing. You can see how much they don't like each other, right? But even Ted Cruz spoke up and spoke against the fact that he was fired and deplatformed. And then you got people like Ben Shapiro and then Candace Owens, going, what about if the shoe was on the other foot, right? Especially for the past, decade, where we've been screaming at these folks, just because they can't be uh, uh, boisterous about certain things. They felt like they were on the cutting edge of censorship, government censorship. But has that ever affected conservatism or these conservative influencers by way of the FCC? Right? I mean, like usually when you hear of the stories of cancel culture or censorship that are happening, right, to any of those influencers, whether it be Ben Shapiro, it's usually people that organize to petition whether or not they want to have these people platformed on their college campuses anyway, right? This is a different circumstance where the FCC is telling an American company that we can do this the easy way or the hard way, and if you don't comply with getting Kimmel off the air, then what, like what's the point? What is the difference? Now, since then, like we do have Disney that still brought them back for sure, but you have these local affiliate, these conglomerates, these media conglomerates that run the local affiliates, like Sinclair Broadcasting Group and Nexstar. They still preempted the show from being broadcasted in like 20% of the country, if I'm remembering his monologue correctly. But like in places like Seattle, you couldn't watch it on local broadcasting. In places like New Orleans, it was another one that he mentioned, right? And so it's like I'm in the position where, I mean, it's still local broadcasting, and like who still is watching syndication when most of the, clearly looking at the streaming revenue get bombarded on Disney Plus, right? And people just canceling their subscriptions. Like, what is, where are the American people when they're actually watching these things? But it still reigns true, right? The FCC is supposed to make sure that there's access given to radio, television, streaming, so on and so forth, right? And so looking at, looking at how much this has impacted like an American comedian, I think people are thinking twice about where actual government censorship is at, you know. But looking at it from a, free market, free enterprise perspective, right? It just reminds me of like Costco and Target when it comes to, okay, this company retained their DEI policies, right? And so people who respect those values started purchasing more, and Costco ended up outpacing Target in the entirety of like a year, right? Their membership started to increase. They have their own private label warehouse, right? Where they have their own products. So they're doing their own thing. And Target, who didn't retain their DEI price or DEI standards or practices or policies, they ended up sucking. So there is a part of this where even last night I was talking on my Twitch stream with a couple of my friends, and it's voting with your dollar is still a prominent part of this free enterprise project, correct? And so it's like the people have spoken on making sure that ABC/Disney still retain Jimmy Kimmel, and like these local affiliate networks who are trying to curry favor with the FCC because they want a merger deal done, right? It's like, what's the point? So I wanted to share a video just kind of like encompassing the whole thing. All right.
Jimmy, Hollywood missed you.
Less than a week after his suspension became a flashpoint for free speech in America,
Jimmy Kimmel stays. Trump must go.
Jimmy Kimmel is back, and he was no holds barred.
Anyway, as I was saying before I was interrupted,
Kimmel is one of America's biggest late-night talk show hosts. He was taken off the air by ABC after making comments about the alleged assassin of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Clearly emotional, Kimmel spoke at length.
you understand that it was never my intention to make light of the murder of a young man. I don't...
There were thank yous and wisecracks, but also warnings about the direction he says the country is heading.
This show is not important. What is important is that we get to live in a country that allows us to have a show like this.
These people had the hottest ticket in town, the live studio audience for Kimmel's return.
I'm so excited to see Jimmy back in action. It's been creating waves because what does this mean for journalism? What does this mean for content creation? Is internet a better place than TV is? So lots of questions around that. Yeah.
It feels monumental, this moment, just of the whole political agenda that's going on both sides.
But not everyone agrees.
All BS. ABC caved in. Disney caved in, their stocks were tanking. Jimmy Kimmel should have been gone a long time ago.
Not all of America was watching though. 25% of local ABC stations, like this one in Washington, D.C., opting not to broadcast the Kimmel Show. ABC perhaps underestimated the backlash to Kimmel's suspension from across the political spectrum.
Oh yes, they
Kimmel
did.
may
They
be back
did.
on air, but this episode doesn't end here. Questions remain about how far the Trump government is willing to go to control the narrative. Concerns extending far beyond Hollywood.
President Trump issued a quick-fire response on Truth Social. Let Jimmy Kimmel rot in his bad ratings, he wrote. Kimmel joked that his ratings were, in fact, higher than ever. He and his fellow late-night comedians certainly blessed by this president with endless material. Martha Kellner, Sky News, Los Angeles.
And sorry, 25%, not 20% of the local affiliates didn't end up showing the Jimmy Kimmel Show. And so, like, look, again, relatively tame. This was what he did. That's how he utilized his monologue. He also highlighted the memorial that happened this weekend and said that he was moved and touched by the whole Erica Kirk, forgiving her husband's murderer thing. And so where we're at with tone are two completely different spaces, right? You have people, nobody is popping a champagne bottle over the death, right? Like in terms of mainstream spaces, whether you look at democratically established politicians, whether you look at news, news, just general news, and in terms of comedians, like looking at Kimmel, right? Relatively tame. But then we don't even get to talk about the other side of this coin where people are legitimately, and by people I mean great value Lex Luthor Stephen Miller, right, who ends up just being the most extra person at this memorial, turning it into a political campaign rally, right, to talk about how their movement is now the storm, right, instead of taking the direction of like an Erica Kirk, or even being as tamely critical of the president because of the whole situation going on with Jimmy Kimmel. You have situations like this, and I'll play it.
When I see Erica and her strength and her courage, I'm reminded of a famous expression. The storm whispers to the warrior that you cannot withstand my strength. And the warrior whispers back, I am the storm. Erica is the storm. We are the storm. And our enemies cannot comprehend our strength, our determination, our resolve, our passion. Our lineage and our legacy hails back to Athens, to Rome, to Philadelphia, to Monticello. Our ancestors built the cities. They produced the art and architecture. They built the industry. Erica stands on the shoulders of thousands of years of warriors, of women who raised up families, raised up city, raised up industry, raised up civilization, who pulled us out of the caves and the darkness into the light. The light will defeat the dark. We will prevail over the forces of wickedness and evil. They cannot imagine what they have awakened. They cannot conceive of the army that they have arisen in all of us. Because we...
Like, bro is preparing for war. Like, this happened in the immediacy of the whole situation that happened the past few weeks, right? Like, they kept on going back and forth between who they could blame when it came to this murderer, instead of just blaming the murderer and keeping it at that, right? People have used this to try to make a catch-all argument about the other side. And like, this is this is a White House senior advisor, right? Like, these are the people that we're actually worried about. Don't even start me about Trump. Trump, like, you could say that he made a joke at the same memorial saying that he wanted to, like, he doesn't really necessarily care. Charlie Kirk wanted the best for his enemies. I hate my enemies. I hate my opponents. I don't want the best for them, right? But like, this rhetoric didn't start overnight. Charlie Kirk, like, the same situation and predicament and set of circumstances and beliefs that created a Charlie Kirk from being controversial in the first place are still here, right? And so, like, look at what they're doing. Just stay focused.
We stand for what is good, what is virtuous, what is noble. And to those trying to incite violence against us, those trying to foment hatred against us, what do you have? You have nothing. You are nothing. You are wickedness, you are jealousy, you are envy, you are hatred. You are nothing. You can build nothing. You can produce nothing. You can create nothing. We are the ones who build. We are the ones who create. We are the ones who lift up humanity. You thought you could kill Charlie Kirk? You have made him immortal. You have immortalized Charlie Kirk. And now millions will carry on his legacy. And we will devote the rest of our lives to finishing the causes for which Charlie gave his last measure of devotion. You cannot defeat us, you cannot slow us, you cannot stop us, you cannot deter us.
I am so tired of hearing this man speak. I mean, but like that speech could have just as been, been you could have played that in, 1930s Germany and still have gotten it's that speech is better in the original German for sure. But like that's where we're at. I mean, like there's no interest from the federal government or the administration on trying to like unify the country, right? I totally understand that there is a need for debate and dialogue, and we're partnering as an organization, right, with the Unfuck America tour, who is actively doing that on campus to try to replicate, sort of what Turning Point USA has been able to do. But we distinguish ourselves from that here at Rise, right? Like every person you see on here that is doing content creation is also an organizer in their community, right? Surgical issues, elevating awareness, elevating those issues. And that's how we distinguish ourselves from what's been, broadcasted from the right wing, is that we're not just some talking heads, right? We have like actual issues that affect our communities, whether they be, environmental justice, structural reform, right? Electoral reform, just democratic participation, civic participation, getting people engaged, right? And you can do that without having to destroy, humiliate, and own college students on campus. What purpose does that serve? Right? Like, I'm a college dropout too. I dropped out of New Mexico State University. Charlie Kirk was a dropout. Made that a very, very poignant fixture in the entirety of his engagement on campuses. Right? I mean, like I totally agree that we should make education more affordable, but I also at the same time know that you don't need the entirety of a full-fledged education to still make it, right? And so, I come from that same type of perspective. I graduated from a military college before I even dropped out at New Mexico State University, right? So I have my associate's degree. But like that would be his whole thing, is just going on college campuses, and these students that learned about Marxism or socialism like last week would just go on campuses and just destroy, own, and humiliate. How is that a unifying message, or how is that a unifying like way of doing things, right? Like, and again, just speaking about Stephen Miller, senior White House advisor, but he's been a communications person for like Michelle Bachmann. She was a former representative, I think, in Wisconsin, either Wisconsin or Minnesota. But, this is the type of rhetoric he goes. Like, the left is nothing, right? As far as I'm concerned, the left wants to make sure Medicare for all is a thing, making sure that we all have, universalized education so that people can go to school. Get more surgical than that. It's about expanding the trades and apprenticeships so that people can get jobs and justice. We have entrepreneurs in our pipeline, right? We just as much believe that people who want to engage in commerce should engage in commerce. Diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially when I looked at hiring my team last year with diversity, equity, and inclusion, that included student veterans. That included people who might not get the same access to be in these types of advocacy spaces as I do, right? And so I don't know where the disconnect is on how the rhetoric on one end is about Medicare for all or solutions and policies that benefit all people. And then all of a sudden, the other side is you're nothing, you'll create nothing, you will be nothing, right? And this all ties into the fact that they want to go, and now there's an executive order that designates Antifa as a terrorist organization, anti-fascism. And like, it could not be a more loosely confederated group I mean, it's probably an amalgamation of so many different groups, but like that's the point of that they want to designate it as a terrorist organization, right? It's a catch-all, and now they could go and investigate anybody that aids and abets that. And so, like, what's next? We want dialogue. We're making sure that we go, especially in progressive organizing spaces, we're making sure that we start and initiate these conversations, right? I distinguish myself from the regular established Democratic Party by criticizing it all the time for being this far behind and being able to develop a messaging plan, right? So it's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. But nobody in established spaces have ever called, in popped a champagne bottle over political violence happening. We do condemn it. But like at the same time, we don't have to at all sanitize the conditions that, brought that that levy this movement to think this way as soon as something like the political violence has happened directly to one of their own. Right? I mean, especially after 2 Democratic legislators in Minnesota were killed by a Republican. There was such a media spin on trying to fault that for with the Democrats, right? I mean, you could go as far back as possible. But like, I'm glad that I'm going to be having a panel discussion on this issue on like how the right has been able to build influence with Turning Point USA, right? And engage folks and, get involved with direct dialogue on campus. And so we're doing our part to make sure that we continue that. But at the same time, we don't have to do that by destroying and humiliating and owning people. Like, what is the point? Hell, one of the things that was interesting to me was that, there was such a deficit from progressive spaces in getting involved in getting engaged with these types of organizations, right? Lately, somebody is picking up the mic, and it's been these Unfuck America tour folks. And so, they've been able to, I'll pull it up, but just definitely watch for the language. One second.
Now I run your show. Don't run shit, bro. You can't even run your diet. Get the fuck out of here.
I think the issue is right now the U.S. has no leadership to present that vision.
Let's go! Over here. Come on, dude. Grab a mic. Yeah, why are you talking to the audience? I'm right here, bro. No, words aren't weapons. That's not how that works. See how I called you a and that's not actually violent?
People are dying left and right just to prove a point.
I think that in the United States, even where we're at right now, I don't think anybody who is dying because of political disagreement. One party right now is very invested in pushing us like further down that road.
Quit sucking dick and get a fucking job!
I was able to go up there and have a productive conversation, and you're yelling he sucks dick.
The left, all you care about is
I'm not left, bro. I lean right, and you're just an idiot. If people aren't willing to engage respectfully with ideas, it's important to challenge that. Granted, I don't agree with everything the speakers say, but I still respect their right to express those ideas.
Already doing the work.
Now I run your show. Don't run shit, bro. You can't even run your.
Already doing the work, right? In the immediacy, this is how progressive spaces respond. And that creator right there, Destiny, I don't agree with everything like he says. Absolutely did not agree with him telling a bunch of IDF soldiers to turn off their cameras when they're committing war crimes, possibly when he was in Israel. Like, there are disagreements here that, like, within the left spaces, all we've done is disagree with each other, right? But now people are responding to this by engaging the way that the way that Turning Point USA has, just be on campus and start debating people, right? If you looked at some other creators at the time, Steven Crowder would go on to, he's a right wing content creator. Steven Crowder would go on to campuses and be like, change my mind, disingenuous as it may be, because he showed up with his own predetermined talking points and just wasn't invested in changing his mind, right? But that, in the same way, over the past decade, the way that they've been able to get sound bites, again, from people who just learned about Marxism or socialism or progressivism last week because they're college students, right? That's that's what we're going to see more of too. Just people just getting very angsty and angry, and it's not even about dialogue. It never was. It was about making sure, you can go on campus and heckle. And like, that's the argument from the conservative end that they've probably experienced from, students on the left as well. We don't want you here, right? But this is where we're at now. So take that as you see it. I'll see you probably this Friday.